Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Udis, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's show is pre-recorded and is called Corruption in D.C. Thanks as always to Carmen Stanley, studio producer and director, Couché Starnes, audio and teleprompter, and Dolores Harris, who's our floor director. I ended last week's segment with a jaw-dropper by claiming that I was exercising power on behalf of the 189 ministers of finance and development on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, and on behalf of the people that will benefit from the global debt facility created at the end of World War II by the Superior General of the Society of Jesus, also known as the Black Pope of the Jesuits, Jose Rizal. This is bound to put people off, so let me reassure you, I am not going to exceed my authority. This means that I'm not going to go any further than the people whom I'm acting for want me to. How can I know this? I have a very accurate way of knowing. It's called the power transition model of the United States War College. I've been working with the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF ever since 1986, and I've been interacting with the beneficiaries of the Global Debt Facility through my social media and via this series on DCTV for nearly 2 years. I write these teleprompters by listening to everyone. I look to see what the banking cartel has tried to hide in the previous week, and I look at the information that people have sent me. I really like Will Rogers' advice, and that is, if you get to thinking you're a person of influence, try ordering somebody else's dog around. Most of my time is consumed by blogging and preparing for the DCTV series on the network of global corporate control. During this past week, I've been spending a lot of my time with my daughter's puppy and kitten, trying to get them acclimated to each other. As for what the banking cartel is trying to hide from you, there was another double broken link. It's the press release of the Board of Governors of the World Bank that was issued on the global currency reset. I cleared the March 9, 2015 press release with the embassies in New York and Tokyo before it was issued. That bogus agent of the banking cartel, Trump, who's only masquerading as President of the United States, has not bothered to tell anybody the truth, that the United States Constitution of 1789 is not in effect because it was secretly replaced by the banking cartel in 1871 when the Revolutionary War debt that Benjamin Franklin renegotiated fell due. Forbes ran a false news article about gold and the dollar just to confuse things. Forbes didn't bother to publish my comment, but I made sure that Forbes and the author of that fake news, Ralph Benko, got my comment just the same. The United States monetary gold reserves are held in the global debt facility. Benko has not understood that the world's monetary gold reserves, other precious metals, and Treaty of Versailles bonds issued by the Fed in the 1930s and now worth $2 quadrillion, are in the global debt facility established at the end of World War II and managed by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. The treaty establishing the global debt facility at the end of World War II was signed by Truman and Eisenhower. Benko is also confused as to Donald Trump, who refused to recognize that the United States Constitution of 1789 is not in effect. The Electoral College was not in place, and Donald Trump is not the legitimate president of the United States. The U.S. is in interregnum after Congress declared a state of emergency and also refused to call the Constitutional Convention under Article 5 after more than two-thirds of the state legislatures requested amendments. During this interregnum, I speak for the United States on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. Forbes did not post my comment, Mr. Benko has fluffed some of the comments, pointing out that the U.S. does not hold any gold in Fort Worth. That is because, as I have stated, the United States monetary gold reserves are in the global debt facility. Forbes, owned by the network of global corporate control, identified by Vitaly, Glatfelder, and Battiston of ETH Zurich, is not credible, and neither is Benko. The day after my tweet, at a movie screening of a very good film about John Lewis, a member of the audience asked Eleanor Holmes Norton about Russian interference and Trump's legitimacy. I followed up and asked Norton about Donald Trump's legitimacy due to the U.S. Constitution of 1789 not being in effect. As I have made clear, Donald Trump was not elected by a legitimate electoral college since Congress has suspended the Constitution of 1789 due to a state of emergency. On March 13, 2017, I mailed the final notice of commercial lien to Neil Gorsuch, who is also committing a hoax against the American people by pretending that the U.S. Constitution of 1789 is in effect when it is not. Neil Gorsuch and Donald Trump are now bankrupt under commercial liens held by the Global Debt Facility. And I tweeted this on March 3rd. I have documented corruption in the D.C. government. In an earlier segment, we explored the land ownership and early settlers in D.C. Commander Michael Reese of D.C. 2nd Precinct was replaced the week following my complaint to the D.C. Board of Ethics and Government Accountability. D.C. Council's General Counsel, Dave Svenyak, lost his job the week I tweeted his involvement in this corruption. 1/3 to 1/2 of Americans believe that our government either was somehow involved in the 9/11 attack or covered up information. The United States is subject to state capture, and we are operating under a second secret constitution. The Constitution of 1789 was replaced in 1871 when Revolutionary War debts fell due to the banking cartel. The courts have been corrupted. At the suggestion of the clerks, I asked the District Court and the Court of Appeals of the District of Columbia to comment on the secret contracts of adhesion. That means a contract that you're required to sign even though you don't agree. And the banks have held these contracts based on hidden statements in our signature cards that waive our rights under the Constitution to real courts. When these judges refused to comment, I presented claims against the surety and fidelity bonds of the federal judiciary for breaking their oaths of office. The United States Congress is run away. A lawsuit, Walker v. Members of Congress, was filed in 2004. This lawsuit established that the actions of Congress are, in fact, criminal in nature rather than simply a civil or political action. Thus, the refusal of the members of Congress to call a convention under Article 5 not only violates the Constitution, but it's a criminal act as well. Walker versus Members of Congress involved a lawsuit against the members of Congress as individuals. This meant that each member was required under federal law to individually determine their opposition to the lawsuit and request the United States to represent them opposing the lawsuit. All members of Congress opposed the lawsuit by requesting the government to represent them. Despite the language of the complaint, which removed any member of Congress from the suit if he supported obeying the Constitution, no member of Congress chose to obey the Constitution. Thus, all members of Congress have publicly advocated that they oppose obeying the direct text of the Constitution, and they support a veto of its text. The lawsuit brought to the attention of the courts that the refusal of Congress was a violation of several criminal laws, including the law 18 U.S.C. 1918, which is a violation of the oath of office by federal officials. The penalty for this violation is 1 year in prison and removal from office. Walker v. Members of Congress was significant as it was the first lawsuit in history directly dealing with a convention call of Article 5 to be presented to the Supreme Court. In October 2006, the court denied a writ of certiorari, and this means it refused to consider the case. However, the United States, under the Supreme Court rules, had already conceded as fact and law that it held that Congress could veto the text of the Constitution. I recently tweeted about this lawsuit. Due to the corrupt business environment in the District of Columbia, D.C. is going to lose its largest employers, the World Bank and IMF. That is just for starters. I have made this point to Mayor Muriel Bowser, who was also bankrupt under a commercial lien for interfering with the global currency reset. 1 year ago, I left a message with Mayor Bowser, and that is, there was a meeting on February 29, 2016, where I spoke with Beverly Perry and Jason Yuckenberg and Tommy Jones about the corrupt business environment in the District of Columbia and hidden martial law. The District of Columbia's police force may not prevent me from returning to my job as overseer mandate trustee of the Global Debt Facility and acting general counsel of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. There is no valid barring notice because none of the corrupt officials in the World Bank or in Allied Barton have any authority to commit the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF, which I represent. I also represent the voice and vote of the United States on the Board of Governors and boards of executive directors of the World Bank and IMF because the United States is in interregnum. The District of Columbia has a special role. After 1871, when the banking cartel adopted a second secret constitution, it used some tricky legal maneuverings involving the District of Columbia. The United States is actually now a series of interconnecting legal entities structured as a corporation, granting dubious powers to the federal government and other governing entities. Beginning with the Organic Act of 1871, the nation has since been stripped of any legitimate sovereignty, and the citizens are now traded as stocks in bondage to a corporate machine. Consider the following facts. The Organic Act of 1871 is formally an act to provide a government for the District of Columbia. It's an act of Congress that repealed the individual charters of the cities of Washington and Georgetown and established a new territorial government for the whole District of Columbia. Though Congress repealed the territorial government in 1874, the legislation was the first to create a single municipal government for the federal district. The new government consisted of an appointed governor and 11-member council, a locally elected 22-member assembly, and a board of public works charged with modernizing the city. The seal of the District of Columbia features the date 1871, recognizing the year the district's government was incorporated. The all-capital letters United States of America created a private U.S. corporation which is its own city-state of its own country with its own mayor, police force, constitution, post office, and it pays no taxes and is not beholden to any other country, just like the City of London and the Vatican. The United States of America, in all capitals, represents a fictitious corporation. Your birth certificate, driver's license, social security number, bank statements are all written in capital letters. which means you have registered, submitted, and applied to be a part of the, and that's in capital letters, United States of America Corporation as a fictitious character. The United States of America is located in the District of Columbia. What is the District of Columbia and what are the other districts? That's the Vatican and the City of London. The owners of the private corporation, the United States of America, are the City of London and the Vatican. When we pay taxes, we voluntarily submit our tax returns to Washington, D.C., yet pay our taxes to the United States Treasury, which is a private corporation registered in Puerto Rico. Henry Paulson, Timothy Geithner, and every Treasury Secretary since 1913 are appointed but not as cabinet members. The U.S. Secretary of the Treasury is not sworn in and doesn't speak any oath of loyalty or defense of the United States. Under the global currency reset, we're going to untangle this spaghetti. There's no rush, and it's going to be straightened out systematically and from the grassroots up. The banking cartel's influence is going to be removed, along with the funding that goes to the banking cartel from our paper money system. That is going to be replaced with local currencies and gold. There are a lot of distractions that are being put in our way to keep us from the single-minded order of business of winding down the banking cartel. Sequencing is going to be very important as we do first things first. I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's segment was I'm being told that we actually have 10 minutes. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, well, let me tell you about something I wanted to discuss with you. This is something that was tweeted a couple of weeks ago. It's instructions about how to do something which is actually a very bad idea. It's very dangerous. The instructions were how to leave your body. It's called an out-of-body experience. There are people who can actually see themselves sleeping and then they go tripping off into the spiritual world. And I have to tell you that I actually once had an out-of-body experience. Usually this happens just before death. People see themselves lying in the hospital bed. Sometimes when people are in a coma and they recover, they'll come back and they'll say, yes, they heard everything that was discussed in their hospital room, and they were actually looking at themselves from, it was a vantage point somewhere in the corner of the room. So yes, we are spiritual beings, and it is possible to have an out-of-body experience, but I want to tell you that it's also very, very dangerous. And that was what I said to the person who tweeted that instruction manual, that it's not a good idea whatsoever to do this. Just because it's possible doesn't mean you should do it. There are people who get lost in the spiritual world and they never make it back. So ignore that piece of advice. And you're going to be hearing a lot of advice during the global currency reset, and you're going to have to use your good judgment. That is why I'm actually advising everyone to get working together in a group so that you can all work through some of these suggestions and see whether they make sense. I want to tell you actually what happened to me when I had the out-of-body experience. I think it's important for people to know what they're dealing with. I'm very forthright. And what happened actually was, and I've mentioned this at other times, I was in my early 20s, and I went up a spiral. And then, inexplicably, I ended in, it was, I'm not sure exactly where I ended up, but there was a large throne, a wooden throne, and seated on the throne was Jesus Christ. And I was I was very excited actually to see this. And so then what I did was I didn't know what to do. I then went back down the spiral, and I saw myself sleeping in my dormitory room. And I decided not to do anything, but just to try to process what I had seen. And my way of processing it was not to do anything, but being Jewish, it was rather disconcerting, to say the least, that I had come face to face with Jesus Christ. So what I ended up doing then was, after I graduated from law school and was living in Manhattan, I looked out the window and there was a Lutheran church across the street. So I figured, since I had seen Jesus Christ, I should probably sing in the choir. And that was what I did for 8 years. I sang in the choir of the Lutheran church. And it was, I didn't think that I had stopped being Jewish. I just thought that it was also possible to be Jewish and to be singing Bach in the Lutheran choir. But also because I tend to tell people about what I experienced when it was time and I was being courted, and some of my prospects were Jewish. I told them that I had also been singing in a Lutheran choir. And so that was why I was nearly left as a spinster at 39. And I finally did find somebody who was willing to marry me, even though I had this questionable background. But he made me promise that we would raise our children as Jewish, and because he was Jewish, and he didn't want to confuse them. So that's my questionable background, and that's what can happen when you do have an out-of-body experience. But I would also say that I was very lucky that that nothing bad happened to me, because it's a very risky thing to do. So I would certainly suggest that you not take that advice up. And as you see, we are all in this universe together, and we are spiritual beings, and we're going to learn how to interact with each other as spiritual beings. And I'm being told now that I have 5 minutes, so I hadn't really planned to make an extemporaneous statement, but let me talk about some other things that I think we really ought to be focusing on now, and that is the disinformation. There is a lot of disinformation about the global currency reset. There is no way that I am going to have a budget equal to the banking cartel's budget, and that is because the banking cartel gets to print money out of paper and keep the difference between what the face amount of the bill is and what it costs them to print. That difference, that's what they're able to fund their publicity with. So you're just going to have to use your own good sense. And what I've been doing when I run across some of this disinformation is I tell people that this is actually showing people, if there was no negative publicity, then people would think that I was really working for the banking cartel. The way to tell that I'm not working for the banking cartel is that everything that I'm doing is to empower people, and the only decisions that I'm going to be taking without consulting people are just the very mechanical decisions, which is how to wind down the banking cartel and how to distribute the monetary gold reserves in the currency of all the people. And everything else, we're going to have a lot of decisions that are going to have to be taken. And what we really need to do is to postpone these decisions until people are healthy and until people have reorganized themselves in a way that has cut out all of this corruption that we have inherited through centuries. Centuries have just this. One of the other things that I think I'd like to talk about is there are people who have said that I'm working for the banking cartel because I'm saying that that there shouldn't be any execution or imprisonment of the people in the banking cartel. And this is not because I'm working for the banking cartel. This is, if you just think about what the global currency reset means, it means that we all have to work together. And if we are threatening the banking cartel agents with imprisonment or death, then they're obviously not going to cooperate. And then there won't be a global currency reset. And the alternative to the global currency reset is World War III and everybody dies. So we really don't have a choice. I'm not saying that the people that work as agents of the banking cartel ought to continue to stay rich. I'm not saying that they should be rewarded. I'm not saying that they should keep their jobs, but I'm saying that they should not be imprisoned and they should not be killed. That is just the bottom line. If we insist on that, when people insist on it, what I say is that they obviously want revenge more than they want survival of humanity. So just think about logically how much corruption there is and what we have to do in order to get a global currency reset. There has to be amnesty. There's no other way. We have 1 minute, so I think I ought to wrap things up now. I want to thank you again for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. We have been talking about the corruption in the District of Columbia, and there is a very tangled mess which we are going to have to sort out, and we will sort it out all together, working together collaboratively. And we're also going to have to give people the benefit of the doubt. We're going to have to act with love, and this is not so difficult actually, because it turns out that is the way humans are constructed. We are happiest when we're kind. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Udis.